Well, I was off for a couple days. Guys wrapped up the framing here on most of the walls. We got a little bit of work to do here so we can finish insulating and running our vapor barrier and then our framing. But my main concern, I want to get this lean-to done. What we got to do is we'll straighten out this end, make sure it's straight, we'll lock it in place, and then we'll go all the way down to the other end. We got to go ahead and straighten this end out. So when we run these purlins, they're all pre-cut. We already know the measurements like they should be, but the problem is you get some cupping up here in the trusses. Sometimes the top cord has a cup to it, so when you go to put your purlin in, it doesn't necessarily fit in there perfectly and it creates gaps, but you can't anticipate where those gaps are going to be throughout this. So as you go, you start to get off a little bit. So what we do is we try to keep it as tight as possible. We level and straighten out the first one, make sure this is all plumb, and then we come down here and do the same, and then we'll go ahead and just fit these in, whatever those measurements are. You know, there's certain aspects of the build that, you know, you try to be precise. I mean, you try to pre-measure and mark and make sure that everything is the way it should be, but the reality of it is the material is not perfect. You can't change the cupping in the trusses, therefore we gotta kinda, you know, adapt, and it just is what it is on that side of it, but it doesn't change anything quality wise. As long as it's a nice straight square plumbed roof, I think that's what's most important. Also, while I was gone, the guys got this area house wrapped. We got a couple windows installed and the wainscot going. We got to wrap up this overhang and we can get all this soffit fascia tied in. As you can see here, we got our framing done for underneath the ceiling. It's basically a 2x6 with a 2x4 on the bottom, stiffening everything up. And normally our steel spans about 8 foot maximum, but these will be a 5-foot span. You can see here, and we just got to do some detail here on the end. So these are all things that we got to kind of address to wrap up, but it's looking sharp. And I think I either misordered, I know we've got some damaged wainscot. This dark steel gets damaged real easily, and not passing blame, but it wasn't us, it just came that way. It had some scratches, and that's just due to the manufacturing process, the way it gets stacked on the pallet. Sometimes you get a little bit of damage. What we've got going on now is a string line. We've basically plumbed up right from here. And then we're just gonna use it to guide this end. You can see way up here how that juts in. Now that's a combination of usually these gusset plates. It's right there at that gusset plate connection. So if I come up here, you can see how far off this is. And that's pretty typical. Usually we've got to move the trusses wherever these gusset plates are for whatever reason. So once we get our bottom defined, Greg's way down there getting that bottom last post plumbed up and connected, then we'll string a line way over there, straighten this line, and measure whatever that difference is, and cut that last base so that it ends perfect and starts perfect. Ended up taking way more chains than I thought, but now we got her nice and straight. For those of you I know that are asking right now, how are you just screwing these on? This is actually going to be really secure. I've got a bunch of GRK structural fasteners in here coming from this way, as well as I've got some toenails from the other side. And this is all going to get tied together with our sheeting. When you're doing a drop purlin, you kind of have to do an overhang this style, and I can guarantee you this ain't going nowhere. I'm sure there's a really good chance that some people are going to disagree with how I did those overhangs, and that's okay. That's what this is for. Feel free to reach out to me, let me know how you do it. I know I could always do a dropped end truss, and I have done that before. Honestly, I just don't always think about it, so this ends up being the way we do it, so I could get better by remembering that next time. But also, you know, you can see that I don't have all that pre-figured out. I kind of just build these overhangs into this connection detail here in place. I kind of figure it out, and there's really no rhyme or reason how I do it because I don't do it very often, so I just always have to like rethink about it, and then make it work. So the first one is always the longest, and then the next 3 are by far the easier ones. What I'm doing is marking out every 3 foot from the edge of the sheet, and then this is the center of the rib. We do that so we can put our filler strips on, and then it's also important to mark out all your sheets so that they run consistent, because I promise you if you just run them to whatever you want, they will not end where you want them to run. So I get a lot of those questions. People want to know, how do we get the steel to go exactly in the layout where we want for windows, doors, and it's always, you got to mark everything out. You can't just run it. So we got these foam closure strips. They follow the profile of the steel. These are an inside closure because they go inside the steel, and then at the top up there, way up at the top of the roof, we'll have an outside closure, and that'll go over top of the roof panel and underneath of that connection trim. But this is where those layout marks come into play. The center of our rib goes right on that mark, and then we got a nice little tongue and groove here. Boom. And then they just lay out nice. You kind of just smush them down, and then they're sticky. Now the one thing about lean-to roofs is you've already got the main structure all installed and framed and basically not moving, so you don't really have a whole lot of options as far as getting it square. So you got to make sure your corners are plumb, and if you're building the main structure is good, then your lean-to should go on quite easily, which ours did. So I don't know if this makes a ton of sense. You can see here the framing that comes underneath our ceiling. We've got 2x6 stiffeners and with a 2x4 on the bottom running flat. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a ceiling on this, so there's gonna be a rib ceiling just like our sidewalls. It's gonna come out and it's gonna die right on the edge, and then we're gonna have a piece of trim that caps that and goes up here, and then we're gonna have some soffit that goes over here. So I didn't want a one-piece ceiling coming all the way out because I don't really like steel ceiling as your soffit. I wanted to keep the same soffit material that we have on this over here is gonna run this whole way, and it'll be kind of like a little bit of an exposed beam. You know, we got a little bit of stuff to work around here. We're gonna have to trim around all these posts, Greg. Did you know that? So getting going on this ceiling, it's actually being a little tedious. We got everything blocked in here so that we could bring that end truss down this 1.5 inches. We've got this header that was an additional thing here that the customer changed his mind on, which honestly, retrospect, I wish we would have taken that post out and that post out. Ran this header continuously, would have made my job a lot easier. However, when we started designing this building, the goal was to have as much headroom as possible. And now we're going to be down about 6 inches below where we wanted to, but in the in the end, it probably would have been a-okay. So now we got everything ready to go. We got to cut some sheets down just a few inches because I had them to go all the way out. Now they're only going to be going to this header. Good thing is with the purlins laying flat up there like that, we were able to punch these ceilings, which we always like punching ceilings. So we forgot, if you remember earlier, we didn't really forget, we ran out of joist hanger nails, so we're coming back before we put the ceiling in, which is what we're going to do next. We've got to come and make sure we hit all these joist hangers that we forgot. What's nice is, now that we're up here in the rafters, this is Fasco America. They actually are the inventors of the scrail nail, so if you haven't heard of the scrail, that's like a screw nail that you can hit in with a nail gun, but unscrew and screw back in with a screw gun. So pretty darn cool, very strong. And they've got this joist anchor nail gun. So this is gonna shoot, say, 10-penny joist hanger nail. A lot better than hand pounding. I know you can kind of twist these out and hit them with your hammer, but it is definitely easier to use nail gun. And it's nice when you're climbing around up in here to not have a hose to worry about. How awesome is it not needing to have a hose, an air compressor running? Yeah, this is a pretty big gun compared to like a Bosch-stitch strap shot, which is what a lot of people use. But without having a cord, it almost doesn't feel nearly as cumbersome. We're just coming through and adding some hangers. Gas powered, so it's going to use either the Pazload or Fasco gas, but I just had a bunch of Fasco, or sorry, I had a bunch of Pazload gas, so I'm using that up. But yeah, it's pretty sweet. There's a couple other brands that make a cordless version. DeWalt has one, and it does not use gas. I just have not used it yet. So I'm yet to be exactly sure if I'm excited about the way we're detailing this, but basically what we're doing is I'm gonna put a trim, like a custom trim, that's gonna cap this header down here where we put the beam in, and then out here we're going to run a, almost like a post trim. It's gonna be like the letter L, and it's gonna go like this, and it'll go out over the edge, and then we'll cap this side right up to the rib. Now when we get to where these posts are, customer is undecided. I'm gonna try to talk him into putting some post wraps on this. So if that's the case, we'll make a custom post wrap. It'll go tight up to the J channel. How do you like those miters? Looking nice and tight. But basically the steel will come into here, will get notched around. And then on the outside is what I'm hoping is my steel is the same, my steel is the same height as this. So when the steel is here, and then I come through with my 1.5 inch post trim, it'll go right over this and will fill this void in. Otherwise, I can't really cut my steel to go around these posts unless they land on a joint, and they don't all land on a joint because they're 10-foot posts and my steel is 3-foot increments, so it's never gonna hit all of them. Liking how this is turning out, nice and flat. We got some good screw lines with punch holes. Now you're gonna see here as we get close to this post, first off, 2 scissor lifts makes a quick job of this, super awesome. And I got to be honest, I'm really fortunate for that. I know not everybody's got 2 scissor lifts on site. But as we go to this post, you can kind of see the sheet goes in. We put those little trim pieces that I made, pre-made, and we have to install it this way because we can't put the steel in the back J and around the post. It doesn't work. Steel doesn't shrink. Well, son of a gun. So right behind me here, I'm working on the overhang and trying to wrap up this steel here, getting the trims on, so that we can run some steel down low, finish up our overhang, soffit, fascia, what have you. But what the problem is, and you can't see it very well, but here's the framing behind the house wrap, but here is my framing on the rest of the wall. So the problem is, I don't have framing on this truss. This is where the truss starts, and now I'm gonna have this screw line that's gonna go through, and it's either gonna stop here and transition to this line, or I'm gonna have to pull all this off and put some framing in so that I can continue this screw line all the way through. When I get down to this screw line down here, that one is still in line, but then we transition to the truss, and I've got framing up here and I've got framing right down there, but nothing in the middle where this screw line is. I hate having a conscience, because it would be really easy just to go ahead and keep going on this. So there we go. Now maybe this makes more sense that I've pulled the house wrap down. This screw line right here had nothing to go through, so I'm not going to worry about this guy. Ah, shoot, I'm probably going to do it too, because this usually we're going to screw up here where the soffit J channel is, but I did not want this line to continue through with nothing. So now those can at least be consistent, and all my screw lines will stay consistent. This is something that I struggle with, thinking all the way through a design of a building to where I know where the screw lines are going to be, so that I can make sure that my trusses that are going to be added on, the lean-to here, are going to line up. I've done this 3 times now, I think, in total. So this is the 3rd time I've done this style of a building, and I forgot every time to have my truss manufacturer put these end frame girt lines, these horizontal girt lines that are installed here by the truss manufacturer. I forgot to tell him where to put them, and maybe the next time I'll learn. But you know, you got to keep learning or you're dying, they say. See here where I snap my line through just to keep it nice and horizontal. So here's something I think that's worthy to note. Whenever we run our fascia, I don't ever really concern myself with landing it in the middle of one of my purlins for the splice joint to be strong. I think it's better to run it long, put it somewhere arbitrarily in the middle, fill in a block on the back side, and then splice it together here. That way you've got plenty of meat to kind of grab with your fastener, and I think it then will allow you to make sure that this piece coming in is flush and everything works out on the junction, and you don't have, you know, a bunch of nails kind of going in on angles to try to hit this end grain. What do you guys think? I think it's a great tip. Pretty good day, I would say. We got this all wrapped up. We got this detail done here. We've got this soffit fascia started, but we really couldn't go anymore until we had this done right here, which is the ceiling. And I'm happy, very much so, happy how this turned out. It's always important to have your lines line up. And yeah, this is just going to be a space for the customer to store extra machinery. This grade will all be brought up to the top of this concrete, which will be the doorway. And you can see now how this detail worked back here. We've still got trims to do. We've still got some finish work to do here. We'll wrap this beam here. This is a 14-inch LVL there. And we did that to get rid of the post that was here. In retrospect, I would have gotten rid of every other post, but you know, always learning, always learning. I'm happy how this turned out. It's gonna be one heck of a lean-to. So things are definitely getting close. We're getting really close to the end. We've got a lot of details to finish up. We got the interior that we still have to do. It's insulated, it's framed. We got all the plywood here, so there's gonna be that 8 foot of plywood, and then the rest will be a white liner panel. That's gonna be an awesome space. I can't wait to get the concrete down. We had a pretty good day. We finished up the other lean-to ceiling. We got another end here wrapped up. I gotta get some trims. I got some at home that I will bring, and I've got some gable trims on both of these ends to wrap up, but it's really starting to look good. So if you're liking the video series so far, make sure you guys stay tuned for the next episode. We should be inside wrapping up the interior. Hit that subscribe button if you would, so you don't miss it. Go ahead, leave me a comment. Tell me what you guys think, or what you really are curious about if you got any questions. But for me, I'm out of here, headed home.